Hello, my sleepy heads. It's good to have you back on History for Sleep. In the following minutes, you will experience a deep state of relaxation. This story helps you to easily sleep through the night, so you can get up energized in the morning. Not only will you fall asleep faster, you will also get rid of disturbing thoughts. Listen to these history stories for at least 10 days for the best results. The longer you listen to the video, the more likely you'll experience persistent and positive changes in the way you sleep. I wish you a great rest, and if you haven't already, we'd be very happy if you consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss any new calming and relaxing history story. Tonight, we're going to slowly wander into the world of ancient Greece, a land of gods and mortals, of kings and warriors, where stories were woven into the fabric of time. The Trojan War, a tale not of one battle, but of choices, oaths, and the slow unraveling of fate. From a golden apple at a wedding feast, to the sorrow of fallen heroes, to the quiet trickery of a wooden horse, this myth has echoed for centuries. Yet here, it will be told not with urgency, but with calm reflection. Over the next couple of hours, we'll gently retrace the path of Paris, Helen, Achilles, Hector, and Odysseus, not to thrill the mind, but to ease it toward rest. But before you get comfortable and let your mind drift into this Greek world, I'd love it if you could take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe. Only if these calm stories of the past bring you peace. Your support truly helps me grow and keep making these calm journey through time just for you. And in the comments, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always so wonderful to see our little community listening together from all corners of the world, quietly sharing these stories across space and time. So, settle in, dim the light, maybe turn on the fan, take a slow breath, and let us step softly into the Greek myths. Now let's begin. Long before the clash of spears outside the gates of Troy, before the wrath of Achilles and the cunning of Odysseus, there was a wedding. It was not just any wedding, but a gathering of gods, heroes, and spirits. A moment when the immortal and mortal worlds touched for a single, fleeting celebration. Tonight, as you rest, we will not rush through this story. Instead, we will move slowly, as though walking barefoot along a quiet shore, allowing each step to settle like sand beneath the waves. The wedding we speak of was between Peleus, a mortal king of Thessaly, and Thetis, a sea goddess whose beauty was said to outshine the morning light. Their union had been arranged by the will of the gods, not through the simple love of two hearts, but through prophecy and necessity. The gods had known that Thetis, though radiant, could never be allowed to marry one of their own, for her child was fated to surpass the strength of its father. Thus, to keep balance in the heavens, Zeus decreed that she would be given to a mortal husband, and so Peleus was chosen. Imagine the scene: a banquet prepared by divine hands, golden cups brimming with nectar, the air alive with the laughter of Olympians. It was a night meant for joy, yet, as with many stories of Greek myth, joy carried within it the quiet seeds of sorrow. As the sun slipped beyond the horizon, the halls of Peleus filled with light not from torches or simple fires, but from the presence of the gods themselves. Zeus, the thunderer, sat with Hera at his side, his gaze steady, though beneath his calm lay the weight of countless worries. Poseidon, lord of the seas, was there too, with the scent of salt water trailing faintly around him. Athena, wise and stern, stood in her shining armor, while Apollo strummed a lyre, his music softening the air like a lullaby. Even mortals could feel that something eternal was unfolding before them, as though time itself slowed in reverence. Thetis, radiant in garments that shimmered like the ocean at dawn, walked beside Peleus, who, though only a man, carried himself with quiet dignity. The union of a god and a mortal was rare, almost unthinkable, and yet here it was celebrated openly, as if the threads of destiny had been woven too tightly for even the gods to unravel. And yet, within this gathering, there lingered a shadow. There was one goddess not invited, one presence deliberately left aside. Eris, the goddess of strife. She was known for bringing quarrels and discord wherever she wandered, and so the gods, hoping for peace, had chosen to exclude her. But myths teach us often that what we exclude does not vanish. Like an echo from a distant cave, Eris waited, her absence sharper than her presence might have been, and with her came the turning point of the tale. The banquet was dazzling. Tables groaned beneath the weight of ambrosia and roasted meats. Baskets overflowed with figs and olives. Pitchers shimmered with honeyed wine. Harps and flutes played melodies that wound like soft breezes through the hall, and laughter, both mortal and divine, mingled in the air. Hera whispered to Zeus, while Aphrodite glowed in her beauty, outshining the torches on the wall. Hermes, ever restless, moved from guest to guest, spreading wit and quick smiles. For a moment, the gathering was perfect, a rare harmony between gods and men. But even harmony is fragile, like a vase balanced on the edge of a table. Into this fragile joy, Eris made her entrance. She did not arrive with fanfare or with violent storm. She came quietly, as strife often does, slipping through the shadows until she stood within the hall. Her eyes gleamed with mischief. Her smile was thin and sharp. In her hands, she held something small, something golden, a simple fruit plucked from the branches of eternity. This was the apple that bore a single inscription. To the fairest, it was not the apple itself that carried danger, but the words carved upon it. For words, like seeds, can grow into forests of consequence. Eris did not speak. She did not need to. She simply walked into the heart of the banquet, between the laughter and the music, and placed the apple upon the table where all could see it. The gods grew silent, their conversations faltering as their eyes fell upon the gleaming fruit. It seemed to shine with its own light, a glow that drew the gaze of every guest. For a moment, no one moved. It was Aphrodite who smiled first, her lips curving with a quiet confidence. Hera's eyes narrowed, sharp with the pride of a queen. Athena, unbending, straightened her back as though preparing for battle. The apple did not roll, it did not tremble, yet already it had divided them. Eris, satisfied, slipped away, her work already complete. For the gods, who ruled the skies and seas, were not immune to jealousy, and none were more dangerous than those who believed themselves deserving of the title fairest. The banquet resumed, but it was no longer the same. Beneath the music, beneath the laughter, there thrummed a low hum of tension, like a string drawn too tightly upon a bow. The apple of discord, so small in form, had been planted like a stone in a river, shifting the current of destiny itself. Hera, regal and stern, saw the apple as hers by right. Was she not queen of the gods, the wife of Zeus, the figure of authority and majesty? Aphrodite, radiant with beauty, believed no other could rival her grace. Athena, wise and warlike, saw herself as the embodiment of intellect and strategy, fairer than beauty alone, for she offered strength and wisdom. Each goddess, in her own way, laid claim to the inscription. Whispers stirred along the table, some guests turning their eyes away, unwilling to take sides, while others leaned closer, eager to watch the drama unfold. Zeus, who ruled over them all, found himself at the center of the quarrel. The god of thunder, who had hurled bolts against titans and giants, found this dispute far more dangerous than any war. For to choose one goddess would mean angering the other two, and even Zeus, mighty as he was, dreaded the wrath of Hera, the scorn of Athena, or the vengeance of Aphrodite. He looked upon the apple, upon the expectant faces of the three goddesses, and felt the weight of inevitability pressing upon him. Destiny, once set in motion, is rarely turned aside, and so, with careful thought, he resolved that the choice would not be his. It was then that Zeus called upon Hermes, the fleet-footed messenger. With a nod, he entrusted him with the apple and the impossible task it carried. Hermes, ever quick, took the fruit in hand, though even he felt the tremor of its power. He was to deliver it, not to Olympus for judgment, nor to Zeus for decree, but to a mortal. In this way, Zeus would avoid the peril of choosing, passing the burden instead to one far removed from the politics of Olympus. The chosen mortal was Paris, a shepherd prince of Troy, whose quiet life in the fields concealed a destiny greater than he could imagine. Paris was known for his fairness of form and clarity of judgment, though in truth, such qualities often mean little when weighed against divine manipulation. And so, as the music faded in Peleus' hall and the laughter grew strained, Hermes slipped away, carrying the golden apple, and with it the seed of a war that would burn for 10 long years. The wedding continued, with songs and toasts and dances, but in the shadows of that hall, something irreversible had been set into motion. The joy of a union had given birth to the sorrow of nations. Thetis, the bride of that fateful day, smiled softly, though even she may have sensed the storm brewing beyond the walls of her wedding. She had long known that her life would not follow the gentle path of other sea nymphs. Her marriage had been chosen for her, her destiny written by the hands of gods who feared her child. That child, as prophecy foretold, would be stronger than any father, and thus Thetis had been bound to mortal Peleus, a man destined to carry both glory and grief. Thetis' beauty shone, her gown shimmering like waves under starlight, and Peleus, though mortal, held her hand with devotion. Yet beneath their vows and blessings, beneath the shining faces of the gods, a new story was beginning, one that would overshadow even their own. The apple, though small, had already claimed its place in history, and through its challenge, the lives of countless mortals would be drawn into the games of the divine. Thetis may not have spoken of it, but perhaps she felt in her heart the sorrow of what was to come, that her son, Achilles, born of this marriage, would one day walk the fields of Troy, and that joy and grief would forever be bound together. When dawn broke after the wedding, the guests departed, leaving behind the memory of music, the glitter of spilled nectar, and the quiet weight of Eris' gift. The mortal attendants whispered of the splendor they had seen, Zeus and Hera themselves, Athena shining like a star, Aphrodite radiant as springtime, Apollo's music echoing in the air. They did not know that what they had witnessed was the beginning of a great unraveling. To them, it was a wedding of wonder, one that would be remembered for its grandeur. Yet above them, in the halls of Olympus, the gods were already watching the path ahead. Paris of Troy, young and unknowing, tended his flocks by the slopes of Mount Ida, unaware that the eyes of immortals were turning toward him. His judgment would not only crown one goddess as fairest, but would set in motion the choices that led armies to gather, ships to launch, and Troy to burn. In this way, the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, meant to bind love and destiny, became the spark of discord, as subtle and silent as a whisper in the night. And so the tale lingers, like a soft thread weaving through time. It is tempting to think of the Trojan War as beginning with the clash of warriors, with the anger of Achilles or the trickery of Odysseus. Yet it did not begin on a battlefield. It began here at a banquet with an uninvited guest and a golden apple. Strife rarely comes with thunder and lightning. More often, it arrives in silence, placed upon a table in the midst of joy. In the slow turning of fate, the laughter of a wedding feast became the echo of war drums. Peleus and Thetis, though honored with blessings and gifts, found that their union carried within it the seed of endless conflict. Eris, goddess of discord, had left behind nothing but a fruit, yet it was enough. And as Paris waited in his fields, his flock grazing peacefully, the world tilted quietly toward its fate. Tonight, as you rest, it is worth lingering on that moment. The hall filled with light, the gods gathered in splendor, and a single apple gleaming upon a table. Picture it gently, without hurry, Hera's proud gaze, Athena's steady calm, Aphrodite's radiant smile. Picture Zeus, shifting beneath the burden of a choice he dared not make. Picture Thetis, radiant yet pensive, holding the hand of her mortal husband. And above all, picture Eris, slipping away into the shadows, her work complete, leaving behind a silence more dangerous than her presence. This was how the greatest war of myth began, not with violence, but with a wedding feast, not with armies, but with a whisper of pride. The apple of discord is a reminder of how fragile harmony can be. In our own world, as in the world of myth, the smallest things may tip the balance. A word spoken, a gesture made, or a guest uninvited. To the gods, the apple was more than fruit. It was a mirror reflecting back their vanity and pride. To mortals, its legacy was far heavier, for it would summon thousands to their deaths upon foreign shores. But in this moment, in the quiet of Peleus' hall, the apple simply gleamed, silent and still, holding within it the weight of stories yet to come. The gods may have left, the music may have faded, yet the echo of that night lingers through the ages, carried softly on the lips of storytellers. And so we close this part of our journey, not with clashing swords or burning cities, but with a banquet, a marriage, and a golden apple. The wedding of Peleus and Thetis was meant to bind the worlds of mortal and divine, yet instead it bound them into a knot of strife. From here, the story will wander onward, to Paris upon Mount Ida, to a choice among goddesses, and to a chain of events that led to war. But for now, let us rest in this moment, as though seated quietly at the feast, watching the apple's light flicker against golden goblets, hearing the faint hum of music fading into the night. In this stillness, the seeds of destiny have been sown, and though their fruit will ripen in sorrow, tonight we hold only the memory of a wedding, gentle and dreamlike at the edge of myth. The story of the Trojan War, though remembered for its battles, began not with swords, but with a choice so delicate, so seemingly simple, that it feels almost strange to imagine that it could ignite a war lasting 10 long years. After the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, after Eris cast her golden apple into the hall of the gods, the seeds of discord began to grow. Upon that shining fruit were inscribed 3 words, for the fairest. It was a challenge disguised as a gift, a spark waiting to catch fire among the proud Olympians. 3 goddesses, each radiant, each certain of her beauty, stepped forward to claim the apple. Hera, queen of the gods, majestic and stern, Athena, wise and fierce in war, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, whose very presence softened the air. Each believed herself the rightful owner of the golden prize, and none would yield. To settle the matter, Zeus, who often avoided disputes that could not be won, chose to pass the decision into mortal hands. He would not risk offending his wife, nor the goddess of wisdom, nor the power of love. Instead, he turned his gaze to a quiet shepherd tending his flocks upon the green slopes of Mount Ida, a man named Paris, who was fated, though he did not yet know it, to decide not only between 3 goddesses, but between peace and ruin. Paris was no ordinary shepherd. Though he lived far from the palaces of Troy, guiding his sheep with the patience of one who knew the hills as old friends, he carried within him royal blood. He was the son of King Priam of Troy, though abandoned at birth because of a troubling prophecy. An oracle had warned that this child would one day bring destruction to his city, and so, in fear, his parents had left him to die upon the mountain. Yet fate, as myths often remind us, cannot be escaped. A kindly herdsman found the infant and raised him as his own, and Paris grew into a man of quiet charm, graceful and strong, with a beauty that rivaled even the sons of the gods. It was to this young man, unaware of the weight destiny had placed upon his shoulders, that Hermes, the messenger of the gods, descended with a simple yet impossible task. He was to judge which goddess was the fairest. Imagine Paris there, the breeze whispering through the grasses, the distant sound of his flock carried on the wind, when suddenly the sky shimmered with divine light. Before him stood Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each radiant beyond mortal comprehension, their eyes fixed on him with expectation. The golden apple glimmered in his hand, heavier than it looked, as though carrying within it the weight of kingdoms and futures yet unwritten. And with that, the choice began. Each goddess, unwilling to leave the matter to chance, stepped forward to make her case. Hera, the queen of Olympus, spoke first. Her voice was steady, commanding, yet tinged with the warmth of regal promise. She told Paris that if he placed the golden apple in her hands, she would grant him dominion over all lands. He would be made lord of kingdoms beyond his imagining, his power stretching across mountains and seas. The thought of empire, of wearing a crown that even kings might bow to, was no small offer. Yet Paris, though listening, said nothing. His eyes lingered on the horizon, perhaps wondering if such power could truly bring happiness. Athena then approached, clad in her shining armor, her gaze sharp with the clarity of wisdom. She promised him not only unmatched knowledge, but also the skill to triumph in war. Under her guidance, he would become invincible in battle, a warrior whose name would echo through the ages. For a young man of strength and beauty, this too was a gift that could tempt even the most modest heart. Yet still Paris hesitated, for though he was no fool, neither conquest nor endless wisdom seemed to stir his spirit fully. And then Aphrodite stepped forward, her smile soft as dawn, her words woven not of command nor strategy, but of longing and love. She spoke not of empires or battles, but of the heart. Aphrodite's voice drifted toward Paris like a gentle melody, almost like the hush of waves upon a quiet shore. She did not speak of crowns or conquests, for such things often turn to dust in time. Instead, she promised him what mortals most secretly yearn for, the deepest love, the most beautiful companion any man had ever known. She told him that should he choose her, she would give him the heart of the most radiant woman who walked upon the earth. Her name, she whispered, was Helen, daughter of Zeus, born of both mortal and divine, and already celebrated across Greece for beauty that could bend the will of kings. To Paris, who had known the solitude of a shepherd's life, this promise was like sunlight spilling suddenly across shadowed hills. He thought not of kingdoms or wisdom, not of war or victory, but of the warmth of love's embrace, of the joy of a face that would look upon him as no other had. It was, perhaps, the simplest gift, and yet, for Paris, the most powerful. For in the stillness of his heart, it stirred a longing greater than all else. The golden apple seemed to lighten in his hand as Aphrodite's words wrapped around him like silk, until his choice, though unspoken, was already clear. The silence between the three goddesses was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Hera's eyes narrowed with cold displeasure, and Athena's hand tightened upon her spear. Both had offered gifts that promised greatness beyond imagining. The rule of nations, the wisdom to surpass all men, the triumphs of war. And yet Paris, young and perhaps reckless in his innocence, found himself drawn toward the softer promise of Aphrodite. Slowly, almost reverently, he extended the apple and placed it into her hand. The air itself seemed to shift, as though fate sighed with both relief and sorrow at once. Aphrodite's smile bloomed, serene and triumphant, while Hera and Athena turned away, their faces shadowed with bitterness. For they were not simply goddesses slighted in beauty, they were powers of vast influence, and their anger would not fade with the passing of a day. Paris, though mortal, had unknowingly planted a seed of enmity in the hearts of queens of Olympus, a seed that would grow into vengeance against him and all of Troy. Yet, as he gazed at Aphrodite, radiant and graceful, he felt none of this. To him, it was not anger he saw, but the glimmer of a promise that one day he would meet the woman whose beauty was said to rival even the goddesses themselves. One day, Helen would be his, and in that thought Paris felt only joy, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the horizon. Paris's choice did not end in silence. For though the gods are immortal, they are not free from pride, nor from the deep sting of insult. Hera, who ruled beside Zeus as queen, swore to herself that Troy would know her wrath. She, who had offered Paris the rule of all lands, would never forgive his refusal. Athena, too, goddess of wisdom and war, marked him as her enemy. It was not in her nature to be petty, but to be denied in such a contest, to see her gifts spurned for the softer power of love, stirred within her a fire she could not ignore. These two goddesses, wronged in pride, would remember Paris's decision long after the apple was given. They would weave their vengeance not through sudden punishment, but through the careful shaping of destiny itself. And so, the choice of a single shepherd did not remain a private matter upon the slopes of Ida. It rippled outward, like a stone dropped into still waters, touching not only gods but kings, not only Paris but all of Troy. Yet, in that moment, Paris knew nothing of this. He returned to his flocks, his thoughts lingering not on the wrath of queens, but on the whispered name of Helen. Like a dream, it hovered before him, elusive, shining, impossible to resist. Helen, though Paris had not yet seen her, was already the subject of songs and whispers across the Greek world. Born of Zeus and the mortal woman Leda, She carried the glow of divinity within her. Her beauty was said to be so striking that men lost their words in her presence, as though their very souls faltered. Already she was married, bound to Menelaus, king of Sparta, whose strength in battle was matched by his determination to protect what was his. Yet the gods, who play their games with mortal lives, had marked Helen not for peace, but for turmoil. Paris's longing, stirred by Aphrodite's promise, would soon draw him toward her, and with that step, 1,000 ships would rise upon the sea. But in the stillness of this story, we need not yet hurry. Imagine Paris walking again through the quiet slopes of Ida, the apple no longer in his hand, the grass brushing against his legs. The sheep graze in silence, untroubled, unaware that their shepherd has changed the course of history. In his heart burns the image of a woman he has never met, a promise made by a goddess who smiles at him still. And though he cannot know it, the threads of destiny begin to tighten, pulling him gently but firmly toward Troy, toward Sparta, and toward the love that would ignite a war unlike any other. As Paris descended from the mountain, Hermes at his side, the gods above were already shifting in their tempers. Aphrodite's triumph was sweet, and she carried it with ease, but the bitterness of Hera and Athena brewed like thunderclouds behind her. Zeus, from his throne upon Olympus, said little. He had, in truth, expected no other outcome, for he knew well the power of love over mortal hearts. Still, he foresaw the trials that would come, though as always he allowed fate to unfold without intervention. For what is a myth but the weaving of choices and consequences, each thread laid down by gods, yet bound to be lived by mortals? Paris returned to Troy in time, not yet to seek Helen, but to be welcomed again by his family, who had long thought him lost. King Priam and Queen Hecuba embraced him, their hearts warmed by the return of the son they had once abandoned. They did not know, could not know, that the prophecy they had feared was still alive within him. For a moment, Troy was at peace, the city golden in the sunlight, its walls standing tall, its people untroubled. Yet within its gates walked the man who had chosen Aphrodite, and with that choice, the city's fate was already sealed. In the quiet of night, Paris often dreamed. Some dreams were gentle, filled with images of the flocks and the hills, the soft rhythms of his old life. Others were sharper, filled with faces he did not know but felt he should. Among them, one face stood clear, Helen's. She appeared to him in glimpses, her eyes bright as dawn, her hair flowing like sunlight upon water. Dreams are strange things, fragile and fleeting, yet they can move the heart with more strength than reason ever could. And so, Paris awoke each morning with a yearning that no simple shepherd's life could satisfy. He thought little of Hera's anger or Athena's disappointment, for to him, the promise of love was stronger than the threat of vengeance. In the myths, it is often this way. Mortals see only the gift before them, never the price hidden beneath it. And so Paris carried on, his days filled with the laughter of Troy, his nights filled with the image of a woman across the sea. Soon enough, Aphrodite would guide him to her. For what is a goddess if not faithful to her promises? Yet in guiding him, she guided all of Greece toward a war that would reshape its history. Helen of Sparta, meanwhile, lived unaware of the storm gathering beyond her walls. Her life was not without splendor, a queen beside Menelaus. She walked among marble halls and golden thrones. Yet beauty as rare as hers was not always a gift. Many had sought her hand before, and to prevent bloodshed among her suitors, an oath had been sworn that all who courted Helen would defend the man she chose as husband. Menelaus had won her, and so all Greece had bound itself, unknowingly, to her fate. She was admired, adored, perhaps even envied, but she was also bound by duty, a wife and queen whose heart was rarely her own. Into this life of order and expectation would soon step Paris, guided by Aphrodite, shielded by the promise of love. When the two would meet, the world itself would seem to pause, as though the gods held their breath. For theirs was not a meeting of chance, but of destiny, the fulfillment of a bargain made upon a mountain slope, when a shepherd chose beauty above all else. And though many would later speak of blame, of fault and betrayal, in that first moment it was only love, sudden and consuming, that bound them. Love, or something that seemed like it, powerful enough to burn cities to the ground. The judgment of Paris stands as one of the quietest moments in the great saga of Troy, and yet it is the spark from which the entire war was born. There was no clash of swords upon that mountain, no cries of soldiers, no walls falling to fire. Only a man, 3 goddesses, and a single apple glimmering in the light. It is almost strange, almost dreamlike, to imagine that something so small could ripple outward into a decade of blood and ruin. But myths remind us that fate does not always reveal itself in thunder. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, and sometimes it rests in the hands of those who believe they are making only a simple choice. Paris, in choosing Aphrodite, believed he had chosen love, perhaps even happiness. What he had chosen instead was a road that led not only himself, but his city, his family, and all of Greece into fire. And yet, in the slow rhythm of the tale, we linger here, at the beginning, where the story is still soft, still filled with the innocence of promise. For once the ships begin to sail, once the heroes gather and the walls of Troy tremble, that softness will vanish, and the tale will move toward its end. And so, as you rest tonight, we close this part of the story with the image of Paris, golden apple no longer in his hand, yet still heavy in the unseen weight of destiny. The shepherd prince, favored by Aphrodite, walked back into the life of Troy, carrying with him the promise of Helen and the quiet enmity of goddesses who would never forgive. The hills of Ida faded behind him, the flocks wandered in peace, and the stars above looked on, ancient witnesses to choices mortals barely understood. The judgment of Paris was not loud, not grand, not wrapped in thunder or flame, but it was enough. Enough to set gods against men, men against men, and love against duty. It was, in its way, the gentlest beginning to one of the fiercest wars ever told. And as we drift away from it now, let the memory linger like a distant melody, the goddess of love smiling softly, the goddess of wisdom turning away, the goddess of queens vowing vengeance, and a young man, unaware of what he had set into motion, dreaming only of a face he had yet to see. This is how the war began, not with fire, but with longing, not with steel, but with choice. And from here, the story will slowly lead us toward the face of Helen and the ships that would rise for her. Helen's name drifts through history like a whisper, light yet impossible to ignore, carried across the centuries on the wings of poetry and myth. When we think of Troy, we think of her, not as a warrior, not as a queen, but as a symbol of beauty so extraordinary that it could stir kings to war. The poets would later call her the face that launched 1,000 ships, and though those words came long after her time, they capture the weight she carried in the story of the ancient world. Helen was no ordinary woman. She was the daughter of Zeus and Leda, born of both mortal and divine, and her beauty was said to eclipse all others. From her youth, she had been sought by countless suitors, men of power and renown who would have risked all to claim her hand. Yet with beauty came danger, for desire has a way of stirring envy and strife. Her marriage to Menelaus, king of Sparta, was meant to bring stability, secured by oaths sworn by her former suitors to protect the union. But fate, woven long before her birth, had set her upon another path. To Paris, the shepherd prince of Troy who had once held a golden apple, Helen was not only a promise but a destiny. And though she lived quietly in Sparta, surrounded by splendor, the threads of her life were already pulling her toward a meeting that would change the course of history. In Sparta, Helen lived as queen, her days marked by rituals of hospitality, the duties of her station, and the ever-watchful eyes of those who admired her. Menelaus, her husband, was no ordinary king. He was strong and capable, less cunning perhaps than his brother Agamemnon, but steadfast and proud. To many, the union seemed secure. Yet in Greek myth, security is rarely more than an illusion. Helen, though honored, was also a woman caught between worlds, too mortal to escape the burdens of life, too divine to live without drawing endless attention. She was admired, envied, and desired in equal measure, and though her beauty shone like the sun, it cast long shadows around her. It was into this life of quiet splendor that Paris entered, guided by Aphrodite herself. To him, Helen was not a distant queen but the reward of his judgment, the fulfillment of the goddess's promise upon Mount Ida. When Paris came to Sparta, welcomed as a guest, the gods themselves watched with bated breath. Hospitality was sacred among the Greeks, a bond of trust between guest and host. Yet even within the walls of hospitality, love or desire or fate can weave its way. For when Paris first laid eyes upon Helen and she upon him, the course of their story was set. Some say it was love at first sight, others that Aphrodite clouded Helen's heart with irresistible longing. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Two souls drawn together, unaware of the fire about to follow. The poets have long debated Helen's heart. Was she taken against her will, a captive carried from Sparta to Troy? Or did she follow Paris willingly, her soul stirred by something more than duty, more than the bonds of marriage? In the quiet rhythm of the tale, both possibilities drift side by side, for myth rarely offers certainty. Some stories tell of Paris seizing her in the night, aided by Aphrodite's enchantments, carrying her across the sea as Menelaus raged. Others speak of Helen leaving by choice, stepping aboard Paris's ship with a heart that longed for something her life in Sparta could not give. In truth, perhaps it was both, love born of passion but sharpened by divine persuasion, a mixture of desire and fate. What matters most is not the question of choice, but the consequence. Helen left Sparta, whether by will or by force, and sailed eastward with Paris. Behind them, the palace halls whispered with betrayal, with broken oaths, with the promise of vengeance. Before them, the shores of Troy glittered in the distance, unaware that the woman stepping upon its sands would bring ruin in her shadow. Helen was no longer only a queen. She was now a symbol, the living heart of a conflict yet to unfold. The journey across the Aegean was quiet, almost dreamlike, though beneath its calm rippled tension and anticipation. Paris sailed with Helen, guided by the steady hand of Aphrodite and the gentle winds she conjured. The sea itself seemed to know the weight of the story unfolding upon its waves. Each stroke of the oars, each splash against the hull, carried them closer to destiny. Helen, gazing toward Troy, felt an unfamiliar mix of fear and longing. The past, with all its duties and obligations, lingered behind her like the dim glow of a receding sun. Before her lay a new world, strange and uncertain, yet illuminated by the promise whispered to her by the goddess of love. And as the waves rocked the ship, one could almost imagine the sea itself humming softly, as though soothing the mortal hearts carried upon it. Though their voyage would lead to war, to sorrow, and to the loss of countless lives, in this moment, it was only a journey of anticipation and quiet wonder. Back in Sparta, Menelaus awoke to the absence of his queen. The empty halls, the untouched breakfast, the silent echoes of a chamber once filled with laughter and conversation, all spoke of something lost, though he could not yet name it. His heart trembled not with anger alone, but with disbelief, as though a shadow had quietly fallen across the bright light of his life. The oaths of Helen's former suitors, once secure in their promise to defend her, would soon gather like storm clouds. Across Greece, whispers and rumors began to circulate, carried by messengers and the winds themselves. The spark ignited on Mount Ida, in the hands of a shepherd prince, had now traveled to the heart of Sparta. And though mortals could not see it, the gods watched with expectation, some pleased, some enraged, all intrigued. For the departure of Helen was more than a single act. It was the unfolding of a thread that would bind kings and soldiers, gods and mortals into the fabric of one of the greatest wars ever known. Helen herself moved with a grace that seemed effortless, though the weight of what she carried was immense. She was both a queen and a pawn, a mortal and touched by divinity, her very presence capable of stirring nations into motion. She thought little of the apple of discord that had begun it all, or of Paris, the shepherd prince who had judged the goddesses. For her, the world was narrowing to the movement of oars, the gentle spray of sea foam, and the hum of a new destiny. She was a woman who had been sought, coveted, and admired, yet now her beauty would carry a burden greater than any crown could provide. The gods had set their stories upon her, and she moved within them as though asleep yet aware, drifting between choice and fate, desire and inevitability. Even now, she did not fully know the chaos her presence would bring, only that it called to her as a distant song, irresistible in its quiet insistence. When Troy's walls first appeared upon the horizon, the city seemed calm, unaware of the monumental events approaching its gates. Paris guided the ship to shore, and Helen stepped lightly onto the sands, her feet touching the ground that would bear witness to both passion and destruction. The citizens of Troy, busy in their daily lives, could not yet know the consequences of this moment. Priam and Hecuba, the royal couple, would welcome Paris, seeing only their son return to them, ignorant of the chains of destiny he carried. And yet, beneath the surface, the threads of war were already entwining. Ships would sail, armies would gather, and men would clash upon the plains outside these walls, all for a woman whose face seemed more delicate and serene than the sharpest sword. The city, with its bustling markets, its sunlit courtyards, and quiet alleyways, would soon transform from a place of peace to one of legend, all because of the choice made by a shepherd and the beauty of a queen who had not yet known the full weight of her power. Paris and Helen's reunion with Troy was marked not by ceremony or festivity, but by quiet anticipation. Within the palace, Helen was greeted by the royal household, who marveled at her beauty yet wondered at the purpose of her arrival. For even amidst the welcome, an unease lingered, subtle, almost imperceptible, like the whisper of wind through olive trees. Aphrodite, though unseen by mortals, guided each step, ensuring that Paris and Helen would remain safe, while weaving the threads that would pull Troy inexorably toward war. The goddess of love smiled quietly, her influence gentle yet unyielding, a reminder that divine intervention often moves softly, like currents beneath a placid sea. Mortals, unaware of these forces, perceive only what is visible: the steps of a woman upon a palace floor, the look of a prince returned to his home. But the gods, in their subtlety, have long known that the smallest gestures, the softest touches, and even a glance can shift the tides of history. The first days in Troy were filled with quiet moments that now seem almost dreamlike. Paris and Helen walked together through the gardens, the sunlight casting patterns upon the marble floors. Birds sang overhead, oblivious to the turbulence that would soon follow. Helen's laughter, soft and melodic, drifted through the corridors, yet within it was an awareness she could not yet name, a knowing that the world she had left behind would not remain unchanged. Even in tranquility, the past tugged at her, and the promise of love whispered by Aphrodite seemed intertwined with sorrow yet unseen. The citizens watched from windows and courtyards, sensing only the warmth of their princess's return, not the shadow that stretched across the horizon. In these moments, the story holds a stillness that belies the chaos to come, as though time itself pauses to allow the weight of destiny to settle gently into the hearts of those who will bear it. Though the world outside Troy's walls continued in ordinary rhythm, merchants tending stalls, children playing along the streets, soldiers drilling in the barracks, the story of Helen had already begun to ripple outward. Across the Aegean, word would travel swiftly, carried by messengers and sailors, reaching kings and warriors whose oaths bound them to her protection. Menelaus, upon discovering her absence, would summon allies, drawing Greece into a tide of mobilization that could not be undone. And yet, in this moment of stillness, Troy remained unaware, and Helen walked among its streets as though time had slowed. For those who listen quietly, it is easy to imagine the hush that draped the city like a soft veil, the anticipation that clings to the air when something monumental is about to occur. The beauty of Helen, radiant and untouchable, moved like a gentle wind through the hearts of those who glimpsed her, not yet knowing that admiration can become the spark of war. Helen's presence in Troy was not merely physical, but symbolic. She embodied desire, beauty, and the fragile line between love and chaos. To the gods, she was a living instrument, a reminder of their power to shape mortal lives through subtle persuasion. To mortals, she was the epitome of longing, the ideal that inspires men to extraordinary deeds and terrible mistakes alike. And in the quiet of Troy's palace halls, she walked with Paris, sharing moments of soft conversation and fleeting laughter, each one tinged with the shadow of what was to come. The golden apple had long been given, the judgment passed, and the world shifted imperceptibly in response. What began with a choice upon a distant hill now manifested in the presence of a woman whose beauty could command armies without lifting a sword. And yet, as we linger here in the calm of the story, we see only her humanity, her quiet steps, and the gentle unfolding of events that will, in time, erupt into legend. As we close this chapter, we leave Helen standing upon the sands of Troy, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the morning sun, her hair catching the light like threads of gold. She is both innocent and consequential, a mortal touched by divine will, the embodiment of love's power and its peril. Paris, at her side, feels the weight of destiny, though not yet fully aware of the devastation his choice will bring. The city sleeps around them, unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon, the ships that will soon rise, and the warriors whose lives will intertwine with hers forever. For now, there is only the gentle rhythm of waves, the quiet breath of wind through olive trees, and the soft heartbeat of a story unfolding. Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships, stands as both promise and warning, a reminder that beauty and desire, even at their gentlest, can move the course of history. And as you drift toward sleep, imagine her standing there, serene and radiant. The story of the Trojan War, though often remembered for its battles, began long before swords clashed or walls fell. It began in whispers, in oaths sworn across halls of kings and palaces of power, and in the quiet stirrings of men fated to play their part. After Helen departed from Sparta with Paris, the world beyond Troy stirred with anticipation. Messengers carried news across the Aegean to lands of sunlit hills, olive groves, and marble columns. Each message, though simple in words, carried the weight of destiny. A queen had been taken, a promise broken, and the oaths once sworn by Helen's suitors were about to awaken. Slowly, kings and princes who had once competed for her hand began to convene, drawn together by loyalty, duty, and the call of honor. Among them were men whose names would echo through history. Agamemnon, brother of Menelaus and king of Mycenae. Odysseus, clever and resourceful, whose mind was as sharp as any blade. And Achilles, the almost mythical warrior of Tday, whose strength and swiftness were unmatched among mortals. The gathering of these kings was not immediate, nor was it simple. Messages had to traverse mountains, forests, and seas, carried by riders and sailors who understood little of the chaos their words would bring. And yet, slowly, one by one, the greatest heroes of Greece set out, their hearts heavy with duty, anticipation, and the unknown trials that awaited them at Troy. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, was among the first to consider the summons, though not without hesitation. Known for his cunning mind and thoughtful temperament, he measured each word of the message carefully. To leave his home, his kingdom, and the quiet rhythms of Ithaca for a war born of desire and divine interference was no small decision. Yet the bonds of loyalty and oath compelled him. He would not ignore the call of Menelaus or the demands of the gods, who often used mortals as instruments in their subtle games. Odysseus's journey would be long, taking him across islands and through storms conjured by both wind and fate. Along the way, he would gather supplies, consult with allies, and reflect upon the nature of honor and strategy. His mind, always alert, saw possibilities and consequences far beyond the vision of ordinary men. He traveled not as a reckless warrior, but as a thinker, aware that every choice would ripple through the lives of others. Even in the calm of the sea, he pondered how a single event, the taking of Helen, could compel kings to leave their homes, gather their armies, and sail across the Aegean to a distant land they had never known. It was a quiet moment, filled with both determination and apprehension, the gentle tension that precedes great events. Meanwhile, news also reached the palace of Achilles in Tday, where the young warrior was both restless and eager. Achilles, son of the sea goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus, was no ordinary man. blessed with speed, strength, and near invincibility. He was the ideal of heroic perfection. Yet even heroes are not untouched by doubt or longing. Achilles' mother, Thetis, understood the weight of destiny that rested upon her son and often whispered warnings in his ear. She knew that if he joined the Greek armies, he would gain glory unmatched by any other, but he would also face suffering and perhaps an early death. And so, within the quiet halls of Tday, Achilles prepared himself, gathering armor polished to a soft gleam, swords and spears shaped by skilled hands, and a heart resolute for what was to come. Even as he readied for departure, he moved slowly, thoughtfully, savoring each moment, each silent reflection, as though understanding that his journey would not only shape his fate, but the lives of countless others. The choice to leave home, to sail toward Troy, was filled with the tension of anticipation and the hush of inevitability. The gathering of the Greek kings was not a single event, but a gradual convergence of men, ships, and oaths stretching across the Aegean. Each king traveled at his own pace, accompanied by warriors, advisors, and vessels that would soon form the legendary fleet. Menelaus, consumed by both worry and righteous anger, moved swiftly, rallying allies from nearby lands. Nestor, the wise king of Peleus, traveled carefully, weighing the wisdom of each action and reflecting on the consequences of war. Even as these men journeyed, the seas and skies seemed to participate in their tale. Soft mists drifting over the waters, gentle winds pushing ships onward, and distant birds marking the passage of time. The world itself seemed to pause, attentive to the slow unfolding of fate, as each hero approached a destiny that would bind them together in conflict, honor, and unspoken fear. Odysseus's approach to the gathering was measured and thoughtful, guided by both intelligence and caution. Though he understood the power of brute strength, he valued strategy, subtlety, and insight above all else. He observed the behaviors of allies and enemies alike, anticipating challenges that might arise before the first clash of arms. His mind worked quietly, constantly mapping possibilities, weighing risks, and considering the desires of those around him. For Odysseus, the journey to Troy was not merely physical. It was an intricate dance of diplomacy, understanding, and foresight. The calm of the sea, the soft lap of waves against his ship, and the steady progress of the oars offered him time to prepare mentally, to reflect on the gravity of what lay ahead. This was a war that began long before weapons were drawn, and in these quiet moments, Odysseus prepared for the storms of both battle and human emotion. Achilles, in contrast, moved with a restless energy, a silent fire that surged beneath his calm exterior. Though the sea beckoned him toward Troy, his thoughts often wandered to the glory he might achieve and the dangers he would face. His mother, Thetis, had whispered warnings, reminding him that heroism comes at a price, and that fate often spares no one, no matter their strength or courage. Yet Achilles, young and bold, was eager to step into the pages of history, to feel the weight of destiny and the thrill of battle. Even as his ships glided through gentle waves, his heart beat faster, his mind alive with the possibilities of honor, courage, and the unseen trials that awaited him. The calm of the voyage contrasted with the intensity within him, a quiet tension that mirrored the delicate balance of fate itself. As the kings continued their journeys, the Greek world seemed to ripple with anticipation. Messages passed along roads and rivers, carried by riders who scarcely understood the significance of their task. Villages and towns along the coasts observed the movement of fleets and envoys, sensing that something monumental was underway. The ordinary rhythms of daily life, the tending of fields, the care of livestock, the hum of marketplaces, persisted, yet beneath it all, a story of epic scale was silently weaving itself. The convergence of kings, warriors, and ships was more than a gathering. It was the beginning of a legend that would echo through generations. And in the quiet moments between tasks and travel, each man reflected on his place in the unfolding tale, the choices that would define him, and the honor or loss that awaited. Among the kings, there were differences not only in temperament, but in purpose. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, sought leadership and authority, determined to unite the Greek armies under his command. Odysseus, ever cunning, measured each alliance and conversation with subtle precision, recognizing that wars are won as much by minds as by swords. Achilles, in contrast, sought honor and glory, aware of both his potential and the dangers that lay ahead. Each approached the journey to Troy differently, yet all were bound by the same thread: the oaths sworn to Helen, the bonds of loyalty, and the inexorable pull of fate. In their separate ships, gliding across calm seas, the future seemed both distant and inevitable, a gentle horizon that promised both triumph and tragedy. The seas themselves seemed to participate in this gathering, carrying fleets as if they were vessels of destiny. Gentle waves rocked the ships, the sun glimmered on the water, and the wind whispered through the sails, soft yet persistent. For those aboard, there was a sense of solemnity, a quiet understanding that their journeys were not mere travel, but steps toward history. Even in the stillness of the night, when stars reflected upon the dark water, the hearts of kings and warriors were stirred by anticipation. Stories of heroism, oaths, and divine favor mingled with the sound of waves and the creaking of timber, creating a rhythm that mirrored both the calm before battle and the pulse of fate itself. Among the Greek kings, relationships began to form and reveal themselves. Odysseus's sharp mind made him a natural advisor and strategist, consulted by those who recognized the subtlety of intellect in the shadow of brute force. Achilles, radiant and nearly unmatched in power, inspired awe and a quiet caution among allies, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. Agamemnon, seeking authority, navigated the delicate balance of leadership, aware that unity was fragile and that temperaments differed greatly among the men he sought to command. Each interaction, each discussion held aboard ships or in temporary encampments, was a gentle threading of alliances and understanding, slow yet essential. The calm of these interactions, often overlooked in stories of battle, shaped the foundation upon which the war would unfold. As the fleet of Greek kings slowly gathered, a quiet inevitability settled over the waters. Each ship carried not only warriors and weapons, but the weight of promises, honor, and mortal ambition. Sailors whispered prayers to the gods, seeking protection for the journeys ahead, while kings reflected on the delicate interplay of fate and choice. Even in these quiet, contemplative moments, the tension of what was to come lingered beneath the surface. Every gentle wave against the hull, every soft gust of wind, seemed to carry the echo of the stories to unfold, the battles to be fought, and the glory and suffering that awaited those who dared cross the seas for Helen. And so, we leave the Greek kings in their slow convergence, Odysseus pondering strategy, Achilles brimming with quiet anticipation, and Agamemnon striving to unify the men under his command. The ships, polished and ready, drifted over calm waters, as though the sea itself knew the magnitude of what it carried. Each warrior, king, and sailor was yet unaware of the full weight of their fate, yet destiny drew them inexorably toward Troy. The gathering of these legendary men, slow and deliberate, set the stage for a story that would stretch across years, echoing in song, poetry, and memory for generations to come. For now, let the gentle sway of ships, the whisper of wind, and the calm rhythm of oars guide us into the anticipation of what is yet to unfold. A quiet, reflective pause before the storm of war rises upon the horizon. The city of Troy, quiet and sun-drenched, now braced itself for the arrival of the Greek armies. Though the walls stood high and strong, and its people moved about their daily tasks with a rhythm that seemed unbroken, there was a tension in the air, subtle but persistent, like the hush before a distant storm. From the horizon came the faint outlines of sails, the slow rise of masts against the sky. One by one, the Greek ships arrived, carrying men whose names would become legends: Agamemnon, Odysseus, Nestor, and the radiant Achilles among them. Each warrior stepped upon the sands with purpose and resolve, the weight of destiny resting upon their shoulders, though none could yet fully grasp the enormity of what awaited them. The clash of armies, the echo of shields, the cries of heroes, all were still whispers in the wind, gentle and distant, as if time itself had slowed to allow Troy a final, quiet breath before the first wave of conflict rose. The first skirmishes were neither grand nor chaotic, but measured and tense, like a careful dance between two forces that tested one another's strength. Spears grazed armor, shields clashed, and the subtle art of battle revealed itself in every cautious movement. Among the Greek warriors, Achilles moved with near-perfect grace, each step deliberate, each strike precise. He felt the thrill of engagement, the rhythm of combat, though it was tempered by a quiet understanding of the consequences. Odysseus, always reflective, observed the battlefield carefully, calculating, anticipating, ready to intervene with strategy rather than sheer force. Even in these early encounters, before the true fury of war fully unfolded, the distinction between mind and muscle became clear. Some would rise through cunning, others through raw power. The city of Troy, for its part, watched and waited, its defenders bold yet cautious, guided by both fear and loyalty to their homes. Prophecies, whispered by seers and priests, had long foretold the scale of the conflict, yet their meanings remained as elusive as the wind. Some predicted the fall of the city, others spoke of heroes who would shine briefly and then vanish. For mortals, these words were at once comforting and terrifying, offering guidance but also uncertainty. On the battlefield, even in the first clashes, the threads of fate began to weave themselves quietly. Each strike of a spear, each parry with a shield, each small decision, to attack or retreat, to protect or pursue, carried consequences that would echo through time. In these initial encounters, warriors tasted the rhythm of war, tension followed by release, silence punctuated by sudden action, fear and courage intertwining in ways both subtle and profound. And though the first battles were small compared to what was to come, they set the tone for the legends that would later be sung, whispered, and remembered. Among the earliest to rise in glory was Achilles, whose presence seemed to radiate power across the battlefield. His armor gleamed softly in the sun, his movements precise yet effortless, and even as he struck, there was a calmness to his fury. Unlike others who fought with clamor and noise, Achilles' engagement was almost silent, a rhythm of intent and grace. He felt the pulse of combat as one might feel the gentle sway of a ship at sea, a steady awareness of timing, weight, and consequence. Around him, other Greek heroes displayed their skills in measured bursts. Ajax held the line with unyielding determination, protecting those behind him. Diomedes tested the enemy with rapid, purposeful strikes, careful and deliberate. And yet, for all their courage and prowess, each hero carried within them the subtle awareness that this was only the beginning, that greater challenges, larger battles, and profound losses awaited them as the war slowly unfolded. The Trojans, too, were not idle in these first engagements. Hector, the Prince of Troy, moved with both skill and a sense of duty, rallying defenders with quiet authority. His armor, dark and polished, reflected the sun in a muted gleam, and his words carried calm reassurance even as the first arrows and spears flew. He understood the stakes. Each action might protect a life, but it also carried the weight of the city's future. Alongside him were warriors whose names would fade from memory, but whose courage contributed to the rhythm of defense. They moved with careful coordination, shields overlapping, spears thrusting and retracting, the soft murmur of commands blending with the distant clatter of arms. In these early encounters, victory was measured not in dramatic triumphs, but in subtle control, in the gentle assertion of strength and the preservation of life. The first battles, while brief, revealed patterns that would repeat throughout the war. Heroism tempered by caution, strategy interwoven with raw courage, and the quiet yet unyielding pull of destiny. Even as warriors rose and fell in these initial conflicts, there were moments of stillness, fleeting and delicate, that lingered like soft echoes. A soldier might pause to catch his breath, a commander might survey the line of engagement, and for a brief instant, the war seemed suspended in quiet reflection. These moments, often overlooked in the grandeur of myths, held the subtle truth of battle. It is not constant chaos, but rhythm, ebb and flow, push and pull, punctuated by sudden surges of action. For those listening to the story tonight, imagine the soft rustle of armor, the faint clash of metal, and the gentle creak of shields as men moved with purpose, all beneath a sky that remained calm and unchanging. Even amid strife, the world maintained its quiet presence, the land, the wind, and the sun observing without haste. Prophecies whispered among kings and seers played quietly in the minds of both Greeks and Trojans. Some spoke of Achilles as untouchable, others of Hector as the savior of Troy. Yet fate rarely reveals itself fully, and heroes often act unaware of the true weight of their actions. In these first battles, each choice, to engage or withdraw, to strike or defend, carried consequences that stretched far beyond the individual. Even the smallest hesitation might allow a foe to advance, while a single decisive blow could inspire awe and fear. The rhythm of the early skirmishes was slow, almost reflective, a dance between power, duty, and the unseen currents of destiny. And in this stillness, the foundations for legend were laid, quietly but indelibly, ready to echo across time. Odysseus, as always, observed with calm awareness. While others sought glory through direct combat, he moved with intention, understanding that the tides of war could be influenced as much by thought as by sword. His eyes traced the patterns of the battlefield, noting the strengths and weaknesses of both allies and foes, planning subtle interventions that would later prove decisive. Though his actions were gentle in comparison to the thunderous strikes of others, their effects would ripple across the war, shaping outcomes in ways not immediately visible. In the hush between clashes, Odysseus considered strategy, loyalty, and the quiet responsibility of leadership, a reminder that even amidst chaos, the mind can remain serene, focused, and deliberate. The first battles also revealed the fragility of mortal life. Even heroes of extraordinary skill and courage faced injury, fear, and exhaustion. Each swing of a sword, each thrust of a spear, carried the potential for both glory and loss. Young warriors discovered the weight of responsibility, while seasoned fighters recognized the subtle balance between action and preservation. In the slow, steady unfolding of these early skirmishes, the story of the Trojan War began to take shape. A story not of sudden victories alone, but of measured movements, quiet courage, and the inexorable pull of destiny. The battlefield, though alive with movement, retained its calm rhythm, the soft beat of feet and clashing arms echoing like a distant drum, marking time and progress in equal measure. As the Greek and Trojan forces continued their first engagements, alliances and rivalries quietly revealed themselves. Men of courage and wisdom discovered one another, forming bonds that would persist through trials and losses. Yet, even amidst camaraderie, there was awareness of mortality, a silent understanding that some might not see the dawn. The gods, often unseen, observed these subtle interactions, nudging fate without apparent intervention. Battles, even in their earliest moments, were more than physical conflict. They were testing grounds for character, patience, and foresight. The soft rhythm of movement across the field, step, strike, parry, pause, mirrored the gentle unfolding of choices and consequences, quietly preparing heroes for the greater clashes to come. Among the Greeks, Achilles emerged as both inspiration and warning. His swift strikes and unmatched power elevated those around him, yet they also reminded everyone of the costs of arrogance and overconfidence. Trojans, watching from behind their walls, recognized the threat his presence posed, their eyes tracing his every motion with both fear and admiration. The first battles, while small in scale, were crucial in establishing reputations, testing resolve, and shaping the unfolding narrative. It was in these moments, often overlooked by tales of later grandeur, that heroes rose quietly, their names beginning to carry weight across both armies. Each act, no matter how subtle, became a thread in the larger tapestry of the war, weaving together courage, strategy, and fate. And so, as the first battles drew to a gentle close, the warriors withdrew, not defeated, but measured, aware that this was only the beginning. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains of Troy, softening the edges of armor and the glint of spears. The city remained resilient, the Greek kings thoughtful, and the heroes reflective, each carrying the quiet knowledge that the war had begun, but the true trials lay ahead. For now, let the rhythm of shields, the hush of battle, and the soft murmur of the battlefield linger like a distant melody, easing the mind into reflection. Heroes have risen, some have stumbled, and the tide of destiny continues its slow, steady course. And as you rest tonight, imagine the fields quieting, the soldiers pausing, and the story unfolding gently, step by step, toward the great conflicts yet to come. After the first clashes of the Greek and Trojan forces, the war settled into a rhythm both relentless and exhausting. Shields clanged, spears thrust and parried, and yet beneath the surface of combat, quiet stories unfolded, of friendship, loyalty, and subtle tensions among the heroes. Among the Greeks, Achilles stood apart, a figure of unmatched skill and potential, yet one constrained by pride and wounded feelings. Though his presence was a boon to the army, he harbored resentment toward Agamemnon, whose actions had caused Achilles to withdraw from the fighting. The warriors around him understood his power, but also his volatility. The tide of the war ebbed and flowed, and in these quiet moments, the bonds between men became as important as their swords. Patroclus, his dearest companion, moved with him closely, a calming presence and loyal friend who understood both his skill and his temper. Together, they embodied both strength and the human side of heroism, the subtle awareness that even the greatest warriors are vulnerable to emotion and consequence. Patroclus, gentle and thoughtful, observed the battlefield with a heart tuned to both courage and compassion. Though not as mighty as Achilles, his wisdom and loyalty rendered him invaluable. He understood the fragile balance between honor and restraint, action and patience. The first days of the siege had revealed the potential for immense bloodshed, yet Patroclus moved carefully, intervening when necessary, offering counsel, and providing quiet comfort to those around him. In the soft hush of dawn or the muted glow of evening, he often spoke with Achilles, reminding him of the shared bond that anchored both their hearts. These moments, though understated, were powerful in shaping decisions, actions, and the quiet flow of the war. For even amidst clashing armies and looming tragedy, the subtle acts of friendship, loyalty, and reflection could shape outcomes as much as the sword. As the battles continued, the Trojans rallied under the leadership of Hector, whose calm determination and steadfast courage became the heartbeat of their defense. Though aware of the formidable presence of Achilles, Hector moved with careful precision, understanding both the strengths of his enemies and the needs of his city. Each choice, from the positioning of troops to the timing of strikes, reflected not only skill but an acute awareness of the stakes. The Trojan warriors followed him closely, drawing strength from his example. Yet beneath the courage was a quiet tension, the ever-present shadow of fate whispering that no valor alone could secure the future. And so, in the soft rhythm of conflict, Hector and Patroclus moved through their respective worlds, one defending a city, the other preparing to influence the course of battle in ways both subtle and monumental. The moment that shifted the course of the war arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the form of a simple but profound decision. Patroclus, moved by the suffering of Greek soldiers and the persistent advance of the Trojans, persuaded Achilles to allow him to enter the battle wearing Achilles' armor. It was a gesture both strategic and emotional, a reminder that even the greatest of heroes can act through trust in those closest to them. Patroclus stepped forward with a mixture of determination and humility, the weight of the armor a tangible reminder of the responsibility he now bore. Each step he took toward the field carried both hope and foreboding, for the gods themselves watched, their influence subtle yet undeniable. And as he moved, the soft rhythm of the sea breeze and the gentle sway of the battlefield seemed to pause, holding its breath for what was to come. The battlefield, bathed in morning light, awaited Patroclus with a quiet intensity. Though he moved with courage, each thrust of spear or clash of shield carried both possibility and danger. The Trojans, unaware at first of the ruse, were surprised by the appearance of a warrior they believed to be Achilles himself. Patroclus struck with valor, rallying the Greek soldiers and pushing back the Trojan lines. In these moments, his actions reflected both strategy and the deep bond he shared with Achilles, the understanding that loyalty could elevate even those not destined for ultimate glory. Yet even as victories accumulated, there was a soft tension, an undercurrent of unease, for destiny often moves quietly before the storm. The gentle rhythm of Patroclus's advance, the careful timing of attacks, and the subtle guidance he received in his heart all hinted at the tragedy quietly approaching. Hector, observing the unfolding events, realized the challenge before him had shifted. The figure leading the Greek advance was not Achilles, yet the skill, courage, and tactical insight displayed were extraordinary. With careful precision, he adjusted formations, urged his men forward, and engaged in combat with a measured hand. Each movement was deliberate, each command soft yet potent, guiding his forces through the chaos with the quiet authority of a seasoned leader. The rhythm of battle unfolded slowly, punctuated by flashes of action and long stretches of tense anticipation. In these early encounters, it became clear that heroism was not only measured in strength, but also in calm deliberation, the quiet orchestration of events that shaped outcomes before any dramatic moment occurred. Patroclus advanced deeper into the heart of the conflict, his presence inspiring the Greek soldiers and unnerving the Trojans. His courage, though different from Achilles' raw power, radiated in its consistency and quiet determination. The soft swish of spear tips, the measured clank of shields, and the subtle movements of men under command created a rhythm of war that was both calm and tense. Each choice, when to attack, when to defend, when to press forward, reflected his understanding of the delicate balance between strength and strategy. Even in the midst of exertion and danger, the flow of thought and intention carried the weight of destiny, guiding actions that would ripple through the story of Troy. The gods watched closely as events unfolded, their presence subtle yet unmistakable. Athena whispered strategy into the mind of Patroclus, guiding his movements with invisible threads of insight. Apollo, protective of Hector, nudged the Trojan prince toward decisive actions, though never forcing outcomes entirely. In the soft hush of the battlefield, divine influence mingled with mortal courage, a gentle reminder that history is shaped by both human endeavor and unseen hands. The slow rise and fall of warriors, the ebb of offense and defense, and the rhythmic clash of weapons became a symphony of fate, quiet yet profound, carrying within it the seeds of both triumph and tragedy. Tragedy arrived gently, almost imperceptibly, as Hector and Patroclus finally confronted one another. The tension was palpable but quiet, a hush settling over the battlefield. Patroclus fought valiantly, yet Hector's skill and the will of the gods guided the encounter toward an inevitable conclusion. In a measured strike, Hector defeated Patroclus, a moment both brief and weighty, a quiet pivot in the story of Troy. The Greek soldiers, witnessing the fall of their champion, were filled with sorrow and apprehension, while the Trojans felt the swell of confidence, tempered by their own cautious awareness of fate. The loss of Patroclus, though sudden, unfolded with the gentle inevitability of destiny, reminding all that even heroism is fragile in the hands of mortal men. News of Patroclus's death traveled swiftly across the Greek lines, reaching Achilles in the quiet of his camp. The young warrior, who had refrained from combat out of pride and anger, now felt a deep and overwhelming sorrow. The soft, rhythmic sounds of the sea, the gentle rustle of trees, and the distant clamor of the battlefield became the backdrop for grief and reflection. Achilles' heart swelled with both rage and mourning, understanding that the loss of his closest companion demanded action. Though he moved slowly at first, contemplating the weight of vengeance and honor, a quiet resolve settled upon him. The gentle sway of the world around him mirrored his inner turmoil, a rhythm of sorrow preparing him for the storm that was to come. Hector, unaware of the depth of Achilles' grief, continued to lead the Trojan forces with measured authority. Each engagement, each command, reflected both courage and strategy. Yet the gods whispered of what was to come, for the wrath of Achilles, once unleashed, would shift the tides of battle in profound and irreversible ways. Even in the quiet moments between strikes and parries, the anticipation of future events hung softly in the air, like mist over the hills of Troy. The stage was set, the players aligned, and the rhythm of destiny continued its gentle, inexorable progression toward the next chapter of legend. And so, we leave the battlefield for now, with Patroclus fallen, Hector standing vigilant, and Achilles poised at the edge of wrath and grief. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the plains, softening the glint of armor and the sheen of swords. The story holds its breath, allowing us to feel the gentle sway of events, the slow, rhythmic unfolding of consequence, and the quiet pull of destiny that guides all who walk the earth or sail the seas. Heroes have risen, some have fallen, and the stage is set for the wrath of Achilles to shape the course of Troy. As you drift into sleep, imagine the hush of the battlefield, the gentle echo of footsteps and shields, and the soft heartbeat of a story moving slowly, inexorably, toward legend. After years of relentless siege, the city of Troy had grown accustomed to the rhythms of war. The walls, tall and imposing, still held firm, yet the persistent presence of the Greek armies cast a quiet shadow over daily life. Soldiers, citizens, and leaders alike moved with careful calculation, aware that every action could shift the balance between hope and despair. Among the Greeks, patience and cunning began to emerge as strategies as vital as swords and spears. Odysseus, ever thoughtful and precise, observed the city with a quiet mind, weighing possibilities, calculating risks, and planning the subtle movements that would soon reshape history. Even in these slow, measured preparations, the tension of fate was palpable, like the gentle swell of a distant tide, unnoticed until its arrival is undeniable. The story of Troy, so long defined by stalemate, was on the cusp of an ending both tragic and transformative, carried not only by force, but by the ingenuity and quiet determination of those who sought to see it fall. The idea of the Trojan horse emerged as a whisper among the Greek leaders, a strategy conceived in the quiet spaces between action and observation. Unlike the clamor of battle, it was subtle, deliberate, and almost invisible in its unfolding. A massive wooden horse, hollowed to conceal warriors within, became both instrument and symbol. The Greeks labored meticulously, carving, constructing, and planning each detail with the care of artisans, aware that success depended on patience and precision rather than sheer might. Odysseus, the architect of this plan, moved with a calm focus, ensuring that every plank, every hinge, and every measure aligned with his vision. The soldiers inside the horse, aware of their critical role, waited quietly, hearts steady but alert, the hush of anticipation mingling with the distant sounds of the city. Each moment stretched slowly, imbued with the gravity of history and the soft, inevitable pull of fate. The Trojans, observing the Greeks' apparent withdrawal, experienced a mixture of relief and cautious curiosity. For years, the siege had constrained their lives, and now, the enemy seemed to recede, leaving the city walls unchallenged. Yet the sudden appearance of the immense wooden horse drew attention and speculation. Some saw it as an offering to the gods, a symbol of surrender or peace. Others, wary and suspicious, sensed hidden danger. Priests and elders debated its meaning, their quiet words carrying the weight of both wisdom and caution. As the people of Troy approached the horse, its enormous form casting long shadows in the soft afternoon sun, the tension was gentle but pervasive, like the pause before a whispered secret is revealed. At night, the city of Troy moved slowly under a veil of anticipation. Citizens wandered near the walls, their curiosity tempered by apprehension. The wooden horse, still unmoving, dominated the central square, a silent monument of unknown intention. Leaders debated in hushed tones, weighing omen and counsel with careful deliberation. Meanwhile, within the hollowed structure, Greek warriors remained perfectly still, their breathing measured, hearts steady but attuned to every sound. The contrast between the quiet patience of those inside the horse and the soft, bustling caution of the Trojans outside created a tension almost imperceptible, yet profound. Time itself seemed to stretch, the night air thick with the gentle suspense of history poised on a delicate edge. As dawn approached, the Trojans made their decision. Encouraged by perceived signs of surrender, some city leaders advocated bringing the horse within the walls. The slow procession toward the gates was careful, deliberate, and filled with a quiet reverence. Citizens followed, all mixed with lingering suspicion, each step resonating softly on cobbled streets. The Greeks concealed within remained silent, hearts steady, knowing the moment of revelation approached. The gates of Troy, symbols of resilience and defense, were slowly opened, and the immense wooden horse entered the city, its shadow stretching across courtyards and streets. In these gentle movements, the fate of a city hung quietly in the balance, the rhythm of anticipation slow but inevitable, guiding both the conquerors and the conquered toward a turning point in legend. Night settled over Troy, and the city grew quiet, unaware of the hidden soldiers within the wooden horse. The soft hum of the night wind, the gentle flicker of torches, and the muted sound of citizens moving about created an almost serene atmosphere. Inside the horse, the Greeks remained poised, listening, waiting, the hush of history pressing upon them. Each breath, each subtle movement carried immense significance. The tension was invisible yet tangible, a gentle pulse beneath the city, carrying the promise of revelation and the slow, inexorable approach of consequence. In these hours, the quiet patience of strategy eclipsed the noise of battle, demonstrating that ingenuity and restraint could rival brute force in shaping the destiny of men and cities alike. In the early hours, the Trojans, exhausted from years of siege, slept or moved softly, unaware of the hidden presence among them. The Greeks waited, allowing the hush of night to cloak their preparation. With the first glimmers of dawn, the moment of action arrived. Warriors emerged from the hollow horse, their movements slow, deliberate, and synchronized. One by one, they stepped onto Trojan streets, soft footsteps barely disturbing the slumbering city. The sudden appearance of enemy soldiers shocked the Trojans, whose morning routine of quiet vigilance was disrupted by chaos. Even in the surprise, the rhythm of fate unfolded with gentle inevitability, the culmination of careful planning and patient execution. Hector and the Trojan leaders, though valiant, were caught unprepared by the quiet strike from within. The city, its gates long open in trust, now faced the sudden intrusion of warriors who had patiently waited for this precise moment. The clash was swift but precise, a stark contrast to the drawn-out battles of the preceding years. Citizens fled through narrow streets, while Greek soldiers moved with disciplined purpose. The quiet patience of strategy triumphed over unprepared strength, illustrating how history often unfolds not in noise, but in careful, subtle movements. The fall of Troy, though dramatic in consequence, began with whispers and measured steps rather than the thunder of brute force. Within hours, the city descended into controlled chaos. Fires ignited softly, smoke curling into the sky, and the clash of swords echoed through quiet streets. The Trojans, overwhelmed and disoriented, struggled to respond. Yet even amidst this turmoil, the movements of the Greeks were deliberate, calculated, and precise. No detail was left to chance. Every corridor, alley, and gate became part of the unfolding narrative. As the sun climbed, the story of Troy's final hours revealed both the ingenuity of the Greeks and the vulnerability of even the mightiest city. The rhythm of conquest was measured, almost serene, a quiet unfolding of destiny rather than chaotic destruction. Amidst the chaos, the fate of the royal house became clear. Priam, king of Troy, moved through the streets with quiet dignity, seeking to protect what remained of his family and citizens. Yet the city's walls, once symbols of resilience, could not withstand the careful, patient assault carried out by the Greeks. The quiet moments of hesitation, the decisions made in trust or fatigue, contributed to the gentle unraveling of Troy's defenses. The story, though tragic, emphasizes the slow but inevitable consequences of choice and strategy, reminding us that even great strength can be undone by careful calculation and the subtle passage of time. By the end of the day, the city of Troy had fallen. The once mighty walls, the bustling streets, and the echoing halls now lay in subdued ruin, the result of patience, cunning, and deliberate action. The Greeks, victorious yet measured, moved quietly through the city, completing the plan they had begun weeks before. The fall of Troy, though a moment of dramatic consequence, had been achieved through careful orchestration rather than immediate violence. The rhythm of fate, slow and deliberate, had guided both conquerors and citizens to this final chapter. Even as the city succumbed, there remained a sense of reflective calm, a recognition of the inevitability of destiny and the quiet power of strategy over brute force. And so, we leave Troy in its final hours, the wooden horse now an emblem of ingenuity, patience, and quiet determination. The city that had withstood years of siege finally yielded, not to overwhelming might alone, but to a carefully measured plan executed with patience and precision. The Greeks, victorious and disciplined, had reshaped history through subtlety and foresight. As you imagine these events tonight, let the gentle sway of oars, the soft footsteps of warriors, and the quiet unfolding of destiny guide your mind into calm reflection. The fall of Troy, though monumental in consequence, reminds us that history often moves slowly, shaped by careful thought, deliberate action, and the gentle pulse of fate itself. Allow this rhythm, both measured and inevitable, to carry you further into rest and reflection, where heroes rise, cities fall, and stories linger softly in the mind. The smoke had long cleared, and the cries of battle had faded into a quiet hush that settled over the plains where Troy once thrived. The walls that had stood for generations now lay fractured, stones softened by fire and time. Streets that had once echoed with laughter, trade, and the chatter of daily life were empty, silent witnesses to the city's final hours. Among the Greeks, victory was tempered by reflection, a slow acknowledgement of the immense cost of conquest. They moved carefully through the ruins, noting the remnants of homes, temples, and markets, each a silent testament to lives once lived. Even amidst triumph, there was a gentle reverence for what had been lost, for the fragility of human endeavors when faced with the inexorable pull of fate and the measured cunning of those who shaped history. In the quiet aftermath, the human toll of the siege became apparent. Families who had survived huddled in shadows, their voices hushed, their movements cautious. The soft murmur of grief filled the air, mingling with the gentle sigh of wind across broken streets. Greek soldiers, who had moved so purposefully in the final assault, now walked slowly, their own reflections tempered by the reality of what they had achieved. Victory, while complete, carried with it the quiet weight of mortality and consequence. Each ruin, each empty home, and each silent street reminded both conquerors and survivors that history is not merely shaped by triumph, but by the subtle, often unseen rhythms of loss, patience, and enduring memory. Even as Troy lay in ruins, its stories began to stretch beyond the immediate aftermath into legend and song. Bards and poets would later recount the bravery of Hector, the cunning of Odysseus, and the unstoppable wrath of Achilles. These tales, gentle in their telling yet profound in their impact, shaped the memory of Troy long after its stones had cooled. Heroes who had once walked the city's streets now lived in the imagination of those who heard their stories, their names echoing softly across generations. In these quiet retellings, the fallen city gained a new form of immortality, preserved not in walls and towers, but in the subtle power of narrative, reflection, and human fascination with courage, strategy, and destiny. The Greek soldiers, weary and reflective, prepared to return home, each carrying the quiet weight of what they had witnessed. Some were celebrated for their deeds, their names destined to endure in song and legend. Others, who had labored in silence or fallen in battle, became subtle threads in the larger tapestry, their contributions acknowledged softly, almost imperceptibly, yet no less essential. Achilles, having avenged Patroclus, reflected quietly on the cost of wrath and the fleeting nature of glory. Odysseus, the architect of the horse and the subtle strategist of the war, pondered the layers of fate, loyalty, and human cunning that had led to the city's fall. Even in the calm of reflection, the echoes of Troy's final days lingered, carried gently by memory and story, resonating in a rhythm both soothing and profound. The ruins of Troy themselves became symbols, quiet and enduring. Broken walls, fallen columns, and scorched courtyards spoke softly of resilience, courage, and the inevitability of change. Where once markets had thrived and children had played, there were now empty spaces that invited reflection on the passage of time and the gentle persistence of memory. Nature slowly reclaimed the land, with grass, trees, and vines weaving through fractured stones, softening the sharp edges of destruction. The quiet reclaiming by earth and wind provided a gentle reminder that life endures, even when human ambition falters. In the hushed stillness of the aftermath, one could almost feel the stories of Troy whispering through the ruins, a timeless echo of both loss and legacy. Among those who survived, quiet acts of remembrance took root. Families honored their fallen, placing small tokens or offering whispered prayers at the edges of ruined homes and temples. Soldiers who had witnessed the fall of the city reflected in silence, their memories carrying the weight of courage, loss, and human fragility. The soft rhythm of daily life began to return, though forever altered by the presence of absence and memory. Even the smallest acts, lighting a fire, gathering water, tending to a shelter, became gentle gestures of resilience, tiny pulses of life echoing softly through a city once full of sound. The stories of Troy, though originating in tragedy, inspired reflection, caution, and admiration across generations. Bards and poets wandered far, recounting the courage of heroes, the cleverness of strategists, and the subtle inevitability of fate. The tale of the Trojan horse, in particular, became a quiet lesson in patience, ingenuity, and the soft power of foresight. Each retelling slowed the mind, inviting listeners to consider the gentle unfolding of destiny and the enduring nature of human imagination. The city itself, though physically destroyed, continued to live in consciousness, a subtle reminder that even in loss, legacy persists. Even in distant lands, the memory of Troy lingered. Travelers spoke of its walls, its gates, and the bravery of its defenders. In homes and villages, parents recounted the stories of Hector's courage, Achilles' wrath, and Odysseus' cunning to children who listened with wide eyes, their imaginations tracing the quiet streets and imposing towers. In these soft, retold moments, the rhythm of Troy continued, a gentle pulse of history and legend moving across time. Though the city had fallen, its influence remained, woven into the cultural consciousness of the world, soft yet enduring. The Greek heroes, returning to their own lands, carried with them lessons quietly etched in memory. Glory, while intoxicating, was always accompanied by loss. Loyalty, courage, and wisdom revealed their power most clearly in quiet moments of reflection and action rather than in moments of loud triumph. Achilles' grief, Odysseus' strategy, and the silent courage of countless soldiers formed a rhythm of human experience, a gentle reminder that even in the wake of destruction, understanding, reflection, and endurance provide continuity and meaning. The fall of Troy became both story and meditation, echoing softly in minds that contemplated courage, consequence, and the delicate nature of human endeavor. The city's ruins, slowly reclaimed by nature, also became a place of quiet observation and reflection. Scholars and travelers later wandered through these remains, observing the subtle artistry of walls and streets, imagining the lives once lived there. The gentle sway of trees, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of birds all mingled with the silent story of human courage and ingenuity. Even centuries later, Troy's essence lingered in these moments of calm reflection, a gentle hum beneath the surface of history, guiding thoughts toward endurance, memory, and quiet contemplation. Troy's legacy extended beyond memory into morality, caution, and inspiration. The fall of a mighty city reminded all who heard the stories that patience, cleverness, and subtlety often outweigh brute strength. The Trojan horse, in particular, became a soft symbol of ingenuity, the quiet triumph of strategy over force. The tales of heroism, loyalty, and the consequences of wrath offered lessons that were whispered rather than shouted, inviting slow reflection, introspection, and meditation on the human condition. In this gentle rhythm, the story of Troy became timeless, moving through generations with a quiet, enduring pulse. And so, as we leave Troy in its quiet aftermath, let us imagine the city's streets softened by time, the walls broken but dignified, and the gentle echoes of lives lived and lost. The Greeks returned home, carrying both memory and legend, while the stories of heroes and strategy lingered softly in the minds of all who heard them. Troy, though fallen, remained eternal in its narrative, a testament to endurance, reflection, and the subtle unfolding of fate. As you drift toward rest tonight, allow the quiet rhythm of its ruins, the soft pulse of legend, and the gentle legacy of human courage and ingenuity to settle around you. Let the whisper of history, measured and inevitable, guide you into reflection, calm, and sleep.